Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming. The sound cut through the quiet hum of the starship like a knife through silence. Jake set down his cup and ran to the bridge of the Starbound. "What do we have, Ryan?" Jake asked his communications officer. Ryan Cooper looked up from his station, his face pale. "Sir, we're picking up a distress signal. It's weak, but it's definitely there. Coming from the Kappa sector." "That's uncharted space," said Lisa Martinez, the ship's doctor and scientist. She had followed Jake to the bridge, still wearing her lab coat. "No human ships should be out there," Jake frowned. The Starbound was an exploration vessel, one of Earth's newest ships designed to map unknown star systems. They had been traveling for 3 months, looking for new planets that humans could settle on. Finding a distress signal in empty space was not what they expected. "Can you clean up the signal?" Jake asked. Ryan's fingers danced over his controls. The static cleared a little, and they could hear something that made their blood run cold. It wasn't human voices calling for help. It was something else entirely. The sounds were weak and desperate, but definitely not from Earth. "Sir," said Paul Bennett, the chief engineer, stepping onto the bridge, "those aren't human distress codes. The computer can't even identify the language." Jake stared at the main screen showing the dark space ahead of them. First contact with alien life was supposed to happen differently. There were protocols, procedures, entire departments back on Earth dedicated to this moment. But out here, millions of miles from home, there were no rules to follow. "Set course for the signal," Jake ordered, "and wake up the rest of the crew. We might be making history today." The Starbound changed direction and flew toward the source of the signal. As they got closer, their sensors began picking up something massive floating in space. It was a ship, but unlike anything humans had ever built. The vessel was enormous, at least 5 times the size of the Starbound, and shaped like a long cylinder with strange bumps and curves along its hull. "My God," whispered Lisa, staring at the screen. "It's real. We're really not alone." But as they got closer, something became clear. The alien ship was in bad shape. Parts of its hull were cracked, and there were no lights anywhere on its surface. Whatever had happened to this ship, it wasn't good. "Life signs?" Jake asked. Lisa checked her medical scanners. "Yes, but they're weak. Hundreds of them, maybe more. Sir, I think they're dying." Jake felt his heart pound. This wasn't just first contact anymore. This was a rescue mission. "Paul, can we dock with that thing?" Paul studied the alien ship's design. "I think so. Their docking port looks different, but I can make it work. Give me 20 minutes. While Paul prepared the docking procedure, Jake called his security chief, Tom Bradley, to the bridge. Tom was a big man with scars on his face from his military days. He didn't look happy about the situation. "Sir, this could be a trap," Tom said. "We don't know anything about these aliens. They could be dangerous." "They're dying, Tom," Jake replied. "Look at those life signs. Whatever they are, they need help." "That's exactly what I'm worried about," Tom muttered. But he prepared his security team anyway. The docking took longer than expected, but Paul finally got the 2 ships connected. Jake suited up with Lisa and a small team to board the alien vessel. Tom insisted on coming with them, carrying enough weapons to fight a small war. The moment they opened the airlock, they knew something was terribly wrong. The smell hit them first, even through their suits. It was the smell of death, sickness, and fear all mixed together. The air inside the alien ship was thin and cold. "Stay together," Jake whispered into his radio. They walked through corridors that were too tall for humans, with strange symbols carved into the walls. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting scary shadows everywhere they looked. The ship felt like a tomb. Then they found the first chamber. Lisa gasped so loud that everyone heard her through the radio. The room was huge, with rows and rows of cages stacked on top of each other like boxes in a warehouse. Inside the cages were beings like nothing they had ever imagined. Some looked almost human, but with different colored skin. Others had extra arms or legs. There were creatures with fur, others with scales, and some that seemed to be made of something that wasn't quite flesh at all. But they all had one thing in common. Every single one of them wore a metal collar around their neck. "Slaves," whispered Ryan, who had stayed behind on the Starbound but could see everything through their helmet cameras. "They're all slaves." Most of the beings in the cages were unconscious or barely moving. They looked like they hadn't eaten in weeks. Their eyes were empty, staring at nothing. But in one of the lower cages, Jake saw something that broke his heart. It was a young female, probably no older than a human teenager. Her skin was pale blue and her large dark eyes followed the humans as they moved through the chamber. Unlike the others, she seemed alert and aware. She was sitting up, watching them with what looked like hope. "We have to get them out of here," Lisa said, already pulling medical supplies from her pack. "There are too many," Tom protested. "We can't take them all." Jake looked around the chamber. There had to be at least 200 beings in this room alone, and they could hear sounds coming from other parts of the ship. Tom was right. The Starbound couldn't carry them all, but Jake also knew they couldn't just leave them here to die. "We'll make room," Jake decided. "Empty the cargo bays, convert the recreation areas, use every inch of space we have. We're not leaving anyone behind." For the next 6 hours, the crew of the Starbound worked harder than they ever had in their lives. They carried unconscious aliens to their ship, set up medical stations in every available room, and tried to make the rescued beings as comfortable as possible. The young blue-skinned girl was one of the first they moved. Lisa placed her in the medical bay, where she could keep a close eye on her. The girl never made a sound, but her eyes followed everything the humans did. She seemed to understand that these strange new beings were trying to help her. As Jake stood in his ship's corridors, now filled with rescued aliens of dozens of different species, he realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. But their first meeting with alien life wasn't the peaceful encounter everyone had hoped for. It was a rescue mission that raised more questions than answers. Who had enslaved these beings? Where were they being taken? And most importantly, what were those metal collars that every single one of them wore? Jake looked at the young blue girl lying on a medical bed, still wearing her collar, still unable to speak. He made a promise to himself that he would find answers to those questions. He just had no idea how much those answers would change everything he thought he knew about humanity. Dr. Lisa Martinez had not slept in 36 hours. The medical bay of the Starbound was now crowded with alien beings in various stages of recovery, and each one presented new challenges she had never faced before. Some of the rescued aliens had 4 arms. Others had skin that changed color based on their mood, and a few breathed different gases than humans. Lisa was doing her best to keep them all alive, but it was the hardest job she had ever attempted. The young blue-skinned girl was her most interesting patient. Unlike the others who seemed broken and defeated, this girl showed signs of intelligence and curiosity. She had been trying to communicate with Lisa using hand gestures and simple drawings on a tablet. "Captain," Lisa called Jake over to her station. "I need to show you something about these collars." Jake walked over to where the blue girl was sitting on a medical bed. She looked up at him with those large, dark eyes, and Jake felt that same heartbreak he had experienced when they first found her. "What did you find?" Jake asked. Lisa pulled up a scan on her computer screen. "These aren't just restraints, Jake. They're neural inhibitors. They're directly connected to the nervous system of every being wearing one." "What does that mean?" "It means they can't speak. The collars prevent them from making vocal sounds. But it's worse than that." Lisa pointed to different parts of the scan. For some of them, the collars also limit their ability to think complex thoughts. "They're mental prisons." Jake stared at the scan in horror. "You mean they're not just slaves? They're programmed to be slaves?" "Exactly. But this girl is different." Lisa looked at the blue-skinned alien. Her brain patterns show that she's fighting the collar's effects. She's managing to think clearly despite the neural inhibition. That's why she can communicate with us when the others can't. The girl seemed to understand they were talking about her. She pointed to herself, and then made a series of hand gestures that none of them could understand. Paul Bennett joined them in the medical bay. His engineering uniform was covered in grease and dirt. "Doctor, I've been studying these collars. The technology is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's some kind of biomechanical fusion that interfaces directly with neural pathways. Can you remove them?" Jake asked. Paul shook his head. "Not safely. They're surgically fused to the spinal column. Removing them wrong could kill the wearer instantly, but I'm working on it." Over the following days, the blue girl became more active in her attempts to communicate. She had learned to recognize the humans by sight, and would get excited whenever Lisa or Jake came to visit her. She had also started trying to help care for the other rescued beings. Despite her own weakness from malnutrition, Ryan Cooper had been working on translating the alien languages, but without vocal sounds from the collar-wearing beings, progress was slow. The girl's drawings were becoming more complex, showing pictures of what might have been her homeworld, her family, or her life before slavery. One drawing particularly disturbed the crew. It showed beings like herself living in what looked like a beautiful city with tall spires and floating vehicles. But the next drawing showed the same city burning, with different-looking creatures attacking and capturing her people. Whoever enslaved them destroyed their entire civilization, Lisa said quietly. On the fourth day after the rescue, something happened that changed everything. Jake was visiting the medical bay when the blue girl started making urgent gestures toward her collar. She seemed frustrated trying to show him something. She kept pointing to a specific spot on the metal band around her neck. "What is it?" Jake asked. "What are you trying to tell us?" The girl grabbed Jake's hand and guided it toward her collar. She turned her head trying to show him the back of the device. At first, Jake couldn't see anything unusual, but then the girl managed to twist the collar slightly, revealing a section that had been hidden against her neck. Jake's blood turned to ice, etched into the metal in perfect, unmistakable English were the words, "Property of Earth Colonial Mining Consortium, specimen R47731, do not feed." Jake stumbled backward, his face pale. "Lisa, get over here right now." Dr. Martinez hurried over and saw what Jake was staring at. Her hands flew to her mouth in shock. "That's impossible," she whispered. "It has to be some kind of coincidence. Maybe the aliens learned English somehow, or—" But even as she said it, Lisa knew she was wrong. The writing was too perfect, too precise. It was clearly manufactured by humans for humans. Ryan appeared at Jake's shoulder. "Sir, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Jake pointed to the collar with a shaking finger. Ryan read the English words and nearly fell over. "No," Ryan said. "No, this can't be right. Humans don't have the technology for interstellar slave trade. We barely have the technology for interstellar travel." But as the crew examined other collars more carefully, they found similar markings. Different company names, different specimen numbers, but all in English. All from Earth. Jake called an emergency meeting of his senior staff. They gathered in the conference room while Tom Bradley's security team watched over the rescued aliens. "Before we go any further," Jake said, his voice hard as steel, "I want everyone to understand what we're dealing with. These collars were made by human companies. These beings were enslaved by humans." The room was silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Paul spoke first. "Sir, that would mean humans have had contact with alien life for years, maybe decades. And instead of announcing it to the world, they turned it into a business opportunity," Lisa finished, her voice full of disgust. Ryan pulled up his computer terminal. "I'm going to run a search through Earth's corporate databases. If these companies exist, there will be records." "Do it," Jake ordered. "But be careful. If this is real, if humans really are behind this slave trade, then the people responsible have resources we can't imagine. They'll do anything to keep this secret." While Ryan worked, Jake returned to the medical bay. The blue girl looked up at him with those trusting eyes, and Jake felt like he was going to be sick. This innocent being who had suffered unimaginable horrors was looking at him with hope and friendship. She had no idea that Jake's own species was responsible for her pain. Jake sat down next to her bed. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, even though he knew she couldn't understand him. "I'm so sorry for what we did to you." The girl tilted her head, studying his expression. She seemed to sense his sadness and reached out with her small hand to touch his arm gently. Even after everything humans had done to her, she was trying to comfort him. That simple gesture of kindness from someone who had every right to hate him broke Jake's heart completely. Ryan's voice came over the ship's intercom an hour later. "Captain, you need to see this. I found them. The companies on the collars, they're real. They're subsidiaries of major Earth corporations." Jake met Ryan in his computer station, where strings of data filled multiple screens. "Earth Colonial Mining Consortium is owned by Henderson Industries," Ryan explained. "Biosystems Control belongs to Watson Corporation. These aren't small companies, Jake. These are some of the biggest corporations on Earth." "How long?" Jake asked quietly. Based on the corporate filings, the first alien contact divisions were created 53 years ago. This has been going on for over half a century. Jake stared at the data, his mind struggling to process what this meant. For 50 years, while regular humans dreamed of finding intelligent life among the stars, their own governments and corporations had already found it, and instead of celebrating the greatest discovery in human history, they had turned it into the greatest crime. The young blue girl and hundreds like her had been born into slavery, bred like animals. Their entire civilizations destroyed so that human companies could strip mine their worlds and sell their people. As Jake stood there looking at the evidence of humanity's greatest shame, he realized that everything was about to change. The question was no longer whether they would make contact with alien life. The question was what they would do about the fact that first contact had been a declaration of war against innocence itself. Jake Morrison had always believed that humans were good people. Sure, they made mistakes and sometimes did bad things, but deep down, he thought humanity had a good heart. That belief died when he accessed the classified files. Ryan had managed to hack into Earth's military databases using the Starbound's exploration clearance codes. What they found made every person on the crew question everything they thought they knew about their own species. The files were marked with the highest security classifications. Project names like Silent Harvest, New World Mining, and Biological Asset Management filled folder after folder of documents. Each file revealed another piece of humanity's darkest secret. "Read this one," Ryan said, his voice shaking. He put a document on the main screen. "It's from 37 years ago. A report from the first alien world they found." Jake read aloud. "Planet designation Kappa 7 contains a highly intelligent species with advanced mathematical abilities. Recommend immediate population control measures and implementation of standard neural restraint protocols. Estimated mineral wealth 847 trillion credits." Lisa, who had joined them to hear the briefings, looked sick. "Population control measures. They're talking about genocide like it's a business decision." More files revealed the full scope of the horror. Entire alien civilizations had been wiped out or enslaved. Their children were taken at birth and fitted with neural collars before they could even learn their own names. Their planets were strip-mined until nothing remained but dead rock. The companies had developed breeding programs, creating generation after generation of aliens who knew nothing but slavery. They had perfected the collar technology to create perfect workers who could never rebel, never even think about freedom. "Here," Paul said, pointing to a technical manual. "This explains how the collars work. They don't just prevent speech. They can control emotions, suppress memories, even make the wearer feel happy about their slavery." Jake felt his hands shaking as he read the document. "They call it the contentment protocol. They can make slaves love their masters." But the worst discovery came when they found the files about the Blue Girl's species. "The Zephyrians," Ryan read from a cultural analysis report. "A peaceful species known throughout their region of space for their philosophy and mathematical achievements. They had no weapons, no military, no concept of war. The report described a beautiful world where the Zephyrians lived in harmony with nature. Their cities floated in the clouds, powered by technology that worked with natural forces instead of against them. They were scholars and artists who spent their lives seeking knowledge and beauty. They never hurt anyone," Lisa whispered. "They were completely peaceful and we destroyed them." The files showed that the Zephyrians had been one of the first species encountered by human corporations. Their peaceful nature made them easy to conquer, and their intelligence made them valuable as slaves. Within 10 years of first contact, their entire civilization was gone. Jake found a video file labeled Final Zephyrian Settlement. He almost didn't want to play it, but he knew he had to see the truth. The video showed human soldiers in advanced armor attacking a floating city. The Zephyrians tried to flee, but they had no weapons to defend themselves. Jake watched families being torn apart, children screaming for their parents, beautiful buildings falling from the sky in flames. At the end of the video, human workers were sorting Zephyrian children by age and size, preparing to fit them with collars. The older ones who might remember their freedom were taken away separately. Jake knew from other files what happened to them. "Turn it off," Lisa said, tears running down her face. "I can't watch anymore," but Jake couldn't stop watching. In the background of the video, he saw a small Zephyrian girl with pale blue skin being carried away by human soldiers. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. "That's her," Jake said quietly. "That's our girl. She was there when we destroyed her world." The crew sat in silence, trying to process what they had learned. Every rescued alien in their medical bay was a victim of humanity's greed. Every collar was a symbol of their species' greatest shame. "The breeding programs," Ryan said, reading another file. "Most of the younger slaves were born in captivity. They've never seen their homeworlds. They don't even know their real names. Jake thought about the blue girl, how she had tried to comfort him when she sensed his sadness. She had been bred to be a slave, her mind deliberately limited by the collar, her people's culture erased from history. Yet somehow she had still found the strength to show kindness to the very species that had destroyed everything she should have known. "Sir," Tom Bradley said over the intercom, "you need to come to the medical bay right now." Jake rushed to the medical bay, afraid that one of the rescued aliens had died. Instead, he found something that made his heart sink even further. The blue girl was awake and alert, but she was drawing something new on her tablet. When she saw Jake, she held it up eagerly, wanting to show him what she had created. The drawing showed stick figures of humans helping alien figures. Jake was in the picture, recognizable by his captain's uniform. The blue girl had drawn herself holding hands with Lisa. At the bottom of the picture, she had drawn what looked like a heart. "She thinks we're heroes," Lisa said softly. "After everything humanity did to her, she thinks we're the good guys because we rescued her." Jake looked at the innocent trust in the girl's eyes, and he broke down completely. All the guilt and shame and horror of what his species had done crashed over him like a wave. He sat down hard on a chair and put his head in his hands. The sobs came from deep in his chest, painful and raw. He cried for the blue girl's lost family, for her destroyed world, for the millions of aliens who had suffered and died because of human greed. He cried for his own shattered faith in humanity, and for the terrible burden of knowledge he now carried. The blue girl saw him crying and immediately got up from her bed, despite her weakness. She walked over to Jake and gently put her small hand on his shoulder, making soft cooing sounds that her collar couldn't quite suppress. Even mute, even enslaved, even after losing everything. She was trying to comfort him. "Why?" Jake asked through his tears, looking up at her. "How can you be so kind after what we did to you?" Of course, she couldn't answer, but she kept her hand on his shoulder and made more gentle sounds as if she was trying to tell him that everything would be okay. Lisa knelt down next to them. "Jake, there's something else. Paul thinks he's figured out how to safely remove the collars." Jake wiped his eyes and looked up. "What?" "It's dangerous and it might not work on all of them, but he thinks we can free them. We can give them back their voices." Jake looked at the blue girl who was watching them both with curious eyes. "If we remove her collar, she'll be able to tell us her real name. She'll be able to speak. And she'll probably be able to remember things the collar has been suppressing," Lisa added, including what happened to her family. Jake realized they were facing another terrible choice. They could free the girl from her mental prison, but in doing so, they would also free her to feel the full pain of everything she had lost. But as he looked at her trusting face, Jake knew what they had to do. She deserved to know who she really was, no matter how much it hurt. She deserved to have her voice back, even if the first thing she did with it was to scream. The blue girl seemed to sense that something important was happening. She looked back and forth between Jake and Lisa, then pointed to her collar and made questioning gestures. "Yes," Jake said, even though he knew she couldn't understand him. "We're going to set you free. All of you." He just hoped that when she learned the truth about humanity, she would still have enough kindness left in her heart to forgive them. Jake Morrison stood in his captain's quarters, staring at the communication console. One button press would send a message back to Earth Command, reporting their discovery of the alien slave ship. Another button would send the classified files they had found to every news organization in human space. He had been standing there for an hour, unable to make the choice that would change everything. "Sir?" Ryan's voice came through the intercom. "Paul says he's ready to attempt the collar removal." Jake took a deep breath. "I'll be right there." In the medical bay, Paul had set up a complex array of equipment around the blue girl's bed. She lay quietly, watching the humans work with those large, intelligent eyes. Somehow she seemed to understand that something important was about to happen. "Explain it to me one more time," Jake said. Paul wiped sweat from his forehead. "The collar interfaces with her nervous system through quantum-entangled neural pathways. If I can create a counter-frequency at exactly the right moment, it should disrupt the connection and allow the collar to be removed safely. And if you get the frequency wrong, the neural feedback could kill her instantly," Paul admitted. "Or it could cause permanent brain damage. Jake, I have to tell you, I'm not even 50% sure this will work." Lisa checked the girl's vital signs on her medical scanner. Her brain patterns show she's fighting the collar's effects more than any of the others. If anyone can survive the removal process, it's her. Jake looked down at the blue girl. She was so young, so fragile. If the procedure failed, he would be responsible for killing someone who had already suffered more than anyone should have to endure. But if it succeeded, the girl seemed to sense his hesitation. She reached up and touched Jake's hand, then pointed to the collar around her neck. She made urgent gestures as if she was trying to tell him that she wanted them to try. "She's volunteering," Lisa said quietly. "She understands the risk and she wants us to do it." Jake nodded. "Proceed with the collar removal." Paul activated his equipment and the room filled with a high-pitched humming sound. The girl's collar began to glow with a faint blue light. Her body tensed and Jake could see pain in her eyes, but she didn't try to stop the procedure. The humming grew louder. The collar's glow intensified. Then, with a sharp crack like breaking glass, the metal band around the girl's neck split open and fell away. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the blue girl opened her mouth and spoke her first word in years. "Zaralyn," she whispered in a voice like music. "My name is Zaralyn." Lisa immediately ran a medical scan. "Neural activity is normal. Brain patterns are stabilizing. She's okay." Zaralyn sat up slowly, touching her throat in wonder. When she spoke again, Ryan's translation computer converted her words to English. "I remember," she said, tears flowing down her blue cheeks. "I remember everything." Over the next few hours, Zaralyn told them her story. Her memories, suppressed by the collar for so long, came flooding back. She remembered her family, her home in the floating cities the day the human ships arrived. "My mother's name was Thalayan," she said. "She was a teacher of mathematics. My father, Kaelin, studied the songs of the wind currents. I had 2 younger brothers." She remembered the attack, being torn away from her parents, the terror of the collar being placed around her neck as a child. She remembered years of slavery, of being moved from facility to facility, of watching other beings give up hope. But she also remembered something else. "Not all humans are evil," she said, looking directly at Jake. "Even in the slave facilities, there were some human workers who showed kindness. They would slip us extra food when the overseers weren't watching, or speak gently to us when we were afraid." Jake felt a small spark of hope. "So you don't hate us? Even after everything we did to your people?" Zaralyn was quiet for a long moment. "I hate the ones who destroyed my world and enslaved my people. But you rescued us. You freed me from my collar. How can I hate you?" Her words made Jake's decision for him. That evening, Jake called his crew together for an emergency meeting. Zaralyn came too, moving carefully but determined to participate. She was the first free alien most of the crew had ever spoken with. "We have a choice to make," Jake announced. "We can report our findings to Earth Command and hope they do the right thing. Or we can broadcast the truth about the slave trade to the entire human population and let them decide what kind of species they want to be." Tom Bradley shook his head. "Sir, if we expose this conspiracy, the corporations involved will do everything they can to stop us. They have private armies, advanced weapons, resources we can't match. And if we don't expose it," Lisa said, "this horror continues. More worlds destroyed, more civilizations enslaved." Zaralyn spoke up. "What would happen to the slaves who are still in captivity?" Jake looked at her sadly. "We found records of dozens of slave facilities throughout this sector of space. Hundreds of thousands of beings like you still wearing collars. Then the choice is simple," Zaralyn said. "We must save them." Ryan looked surprised. "You want to help us? Even though humans are responsible for enslaving your people?" Zaralyn stood up, though she was still weak from years of malnutrition. "The humans who enslaved us are not the same humans who freed us. I have seen kindness from your species even in the darkest places. If we work together, we can stop this evil and save those who are still trapped." Her words inspired something in Jake that he hadn't felt in days. Hope. "Paul, how many collars can you remove?" Paul did quick calculations. "With the equipment we have, maybe 20 or 30. But if we had more resources, better facilities, what if we had help?" Jake asked. "What if other humans joined us?" Zaralyn nodded eagerly. "Many of my people in the slave facilities still remember our old ways, even with the collars. If we could free them, they would fight alongside you." Jake made his decision. "We're going to broadcast everything. The files, the videos, the truth about what's been done in humanity's name. Let every human in the galaxy see what their corporations have done. Sir, Tom warned, that's treason. Earth Command will send ships to stop us. Good, Jake said firmly. Let them come. Let every human choose which side they want to be on. That night, Jake sat with Zara Lynn in the observation lounge looking out at the stars. She was trying to teach him some words in her native language, while he told her about Earth and human culture. Jake Morrison, she said, practicing his name. Why did you choose to help us? Jake thought about it for a moment. Because it was the right thing to do. Because every being deserves to be free. And because, he paused, struggling with the words, because I want to believe that humans can be better than what we've become. Zara Lynn smiled, the first truly happy expression he had seen from her. You already are better. You proved that when you chose to save us instead of ignoring our suffering. The next morning, Jake activated the ship's long-range communication array. He broadcast everything, the files, the videos, the evidence of humanity's crimes against alien life. He included footage of Zara Lynn speaking about her experiences, and images of all the rescued beings recovering in the Starbound's medical facilities. The message went out to every human colony, every news network, every government office in human space. There was no taking it back. Within hours, responses began flooding in. Some messages were angry denials, others were threats against Jake and his crew. But many, many more were messages of support from humans who were horrified to learn what had been done in their name. Captain Morrison, one message said, "This is Admiral Sarah Collins of the Independent Fleet. My ships are en route to your location. We're here to help." Zara Lynn listened to the incoming messages with wonder. So many of your people want to help. I never imagined, Jake smiled at her. You're about to learn something about humanity, Zara Lynn. When we make mistakes, we make them big. But when we decide to do what's right, we don't do it halfway. As more ships arrived to join them, Jake realized they weren't just rescuing slaves anymore. They were starting a revolution. And at the center of it all was a young blue alien girl who had chosen forgiveness over revenge, hope over hatred. Zara Lynn had shown them what humanity could be at its best. Now it was time to live up to her example. 6 months after Jake Morrison first saw the words on Zara Lynn's collar, the galaxy was at war. But it wasn't the war anyone had expected. The Starbound had become the flagship of the largest rescue fleet in human history. Ships from dozens of colonies had joined them, carrying volunteers who had given up their comfortable lives to fight against the slave trade. Former corporate executives worked alongside alien refugees. Former military officers took orders from rescued slaves who knew the locations of hidden facilities. Zara Lynn stood on the bridge of the Starbound, no longer the frightened girl they had first rescued. She wore a simple blue uniform that matched her skin, and around her neck was a necklace of her own choosing, made from crystals that reminded her of her lost homeworld. She had become the unofficial leader of the freed aliens, and her speeches had inspired humans across the galaxy to join their cause. The next facility is in the Omega sector, she told Jake, pointing to a star map. It's where they keep the newest captures. Many of them still remember their families. Jake nodded. How many ships do we have in position? 47 human vessels and 23 alien ships, replied Captain Sam Rodriguez, who had joined them with a fleet of cargo haulers converted into medical ships. The resistance is growing faster than we can count. The resistance had started with Jake's broadcast, but it had exploded when humans learned the full truth. Families discovered that their tax money had funded the slave trade. Workers learned that the cheap alien labor undercutting their jobs was actually enslaved beings. Religious leaders declared the enslavement of intelligent life to be the greatest sin in human history. Corporate attempts to silence the truth had only made things worse. When Henderson Industries tried to destroy evidence, their own employees leaked it to the press. When Watson Corporation sent private armies to attack rescue ships, human military units defected to protect the refugees. Sir, Ryan announced from his communication station, we're receiving a transmission from the facility. They're demanding that we turn around. Put them on screen, Jake ordered. The face that appeared was that of Marcus Webb, one of the corporate executives Jake had seen in the classified files. Webb looked tired and angry, surrounded by armed guards in what appeared to be a fortified control room. Captain Morrison, Webb said, you're interfering with lawful corporate operations. Turn your ships around and return to Earth space immediately. Jake looked at Zara Lynn, who stepped forward to face the screen. "Mr. Webb," she said in perfect English, "my name is Zara Lynn of the Zephyrian people. You have been holding my brothers and sisters in slavery. We have come to take them home." Webb's face went pale. It was probably the first time he had ever heard one of his products speak. "Those beings are corporate property," he stammered. "They're not intelligent enough to what?" Zara Lynn interrupted. "To feel pain when you torture us? To grieve when you tear us from our families? To hope for freedom when you chain our minds?" Her voice grew stronger with each word. "We are not property, Mr. Webb, we are people, and we remember everything you have done to us." Webb cut the transmission, but Jake could see the fear in his eyes before the screen went dark. The rescue operation began at dawn. Unlike the early desperate missions, this one was carefully planned and perfectly executed. Human and alien ships worked together, using Paul's improved collar removal technology and Lisa's medical expertise to free hundreds of slaves quickly and safely. Jake led a team into the facility's main detention center, where they found rows upon rows of beings from dozens of different species. Some were recent captures who still showed defiance in their eyes. Others had been slaves for so long that they cowered when the rescue team approached. But when Zara Lynn appeared, speaking in multiple alien languages to reassure the frightened beings, Jake saw something beautiful happen. Hope spread through the detention center like sunrise breaking over a dark world. "You are safe now," Zara Lynn told them in her musical voice. "You are free." As Paul's teams worked to remove collars, Jake found himself in a corridor lined with cages holding the youngest slaves. Children of various species, some no older than human toddlers, all wearing the terrible metal bands around their necks. In one cage, Jake found a small being that looked almost like a human child but with silver skin and 4 arms. When Jake opened the cage door, the child didn't move. It just stared at him with empty, hopeless eyes. Jake knelt down slowly. "It's okay," he said gently. "We're here to help you." The child didn't respond. Its color had been implanted so young that it had never known what it meant to think freely or speak its own thoughts. Zara Lynn appeared beside Jake. She knelt next to the child and began singing softly in her native language. Somehow the melody seemed to reach through the collar's mental barriers. The child's eyes began to focus, and it reached out tentatively with one small hand. "Every being deserves to hear the songs of their own people," Zara Lynn said, "even if they've forgotten how to sing them." The rescue took 18 hours. When it was over, they had freed over 3,000 beings and captured enough evidence to expose 12 more corporate facilities. But for Jake, the most important moment came when they were preparing to leave. Marcus Webb was brought before them in restraints. The corporate executive who had spoken so arrogantly on the screen now looked broken and defeated. His own security forces had surrendered when they realized they were fighting to protect slavery. "What are you going to do with me?" Webb asked. Jake looked at Zara Lynn. As the representative of the freed aliens, the choice was hers. "You will be tried for your crimes," she said simply, "but by both human and alien judges. Your fate will be decided by the people you helped to enslave, and the people whose laws you broke." Webb stared at her in amazement. "You're not going to execute me?" "We are not you," Zara Lynn replied. "We do not solve problems by destroying life. We solve them by protecting it." 2 years later, Jake stood in the capital city of New Haven, the first truly integrated human-alien colony. The city was a marvel of cooperation, with architecture that combined human engineering with the artistic traditions of a dozen alien species. Children played in the streets, some human, some alien, many wearing no collars at all except for decorative jewelry they had chosen themselves. Former slaves worked alongside former corporate employees in businesses that served beings from across the galaxy. Zara Lynn had become the colony's first elected president, chosen by both humans and aliens who recognized her wisdom and compassion. She had never sought power, but she had accepted the responsibility to help build a better future. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Jake as they walked through the city center. "Giving up your old life to save us?" Jake looked around at the thriving community they had built together. "Regret saving innocent people from slavery?" "Never, but you lost so much. Your career, your home on Earth, the respect of many humans." Jake smiled. "I gained something more important. I learned what humanity is really capable of when we choose to do what's right instead of what's profitable." As they walked, they passed a memorial wall covered with the names of slaves who had died in captivity before they could be rescued. Jake found the names of Zaralin's family among the thousands listed there. Zaralin placed her hand on her parents' names, carved in stone in both English and Zephyrian script. "They would have been proud of you," Jake said quietly. "They would have been proud of all of us," she replied. "Humans and aliens working together to build something beautiful from something horrible." That evening, Jake attended the colony's weekly assembly, where humans and aliens came together to discuss community issues and make decisions by consensus. The meeting was conducted in 6 different languages, with translation provided for everyone. A young human girl raised her hand to speak. "President Zaralin, my teacher says that humans used to keep aliens as slaves." "Is that really true?" The room fell silent. Many of the adult humans looked uncomfortable, while the alien adults remembered their own experiences in captivity. Zaralin stood up to answer. "Yes, it's true. Some humans did terrible things to my people and to many other species, but other humans risked everything to save us. The same species that created chains also broke them." She gestured to Jake and the other humans in the room. These humans could have ignored our suffering. They could have stayed safe and comfortable in their old lives. Instead, they chose to stand with us against their own kind when they learned the truth. That is why we trust them. That is why we build this new world together. The young girl thought about this for a moment. So humans can be good or bad just like anyone else. "Exactly," Zaralin said with a smile. "And every day every human and every alien must choose which they want to be." After the meeting, Jake walked to the edge of the colony where he could see the stars. The galaxy was a different place now. The corporate slave trade had been shut down, its leaders tried and imprisoned. Dozens of species that had been enslaved were now free to rebuild their civilizations. Humanity's reputation among the stars was complicated. They were known as both the species that had committed the galaxy's worst crime and the species that had sacrificed everything to make things right. Some alien civilizations still didn't trust humans. Others welcomed them as partners and friends.